Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new series known as Retain or Reboot. A show in which I look at some franchises, whether it be from the movies, TV shows, video games or even comic books, and judge on whether they should be kept in their current form or in this case be revived, or whether they'd be better off in rebooting the entire series altogether. Now I did do something very similar last year in terms of the Marvel and Fox franchises, but since there have been plenty of rumours in relation of an X-Men the Animated Series revival as of late, I thought that this would be the perfect gateway into reviving this series some more and focus on X-Men the Animated Series. And how I'm going to be going over this is that I'm going to be focusing on both the pros and the cons of reviving X-Men the Animated Series, and then in the end I will decide on whether it's a good idea to revive the show or if they're better off doing a complete reboot. But without further ado, let's begin with the pros. Now first and foremost, I do want to focus an obvious one out of the way, and that is of course the fact that one of the many pros behind X-Men the Animated Series is the fact that there is a massive cult following. And the fact that there's still a massive fan base surrounding this cartoon after all of these years just comes to show on how impactful this show really is. And this is the exact same cult following who are praying in that the series could be revived, which does come to show in that there is a huge demand for this series revival. And if Samurai Jack is anything to go by, if the demand is high enough, then we could potentially see the return of this incarnation of the X-Men. Another pro that comes to mind is just how well they have handled these characters within the series, as well as the fact that the storytelling is pretty on point. And sure, one could argue that they do feel very dated in today's standards, but on the whole, the amount of care that they put within different story arcs is truly something that must be appreciated, as this show did the likes of the Apocalypse storyline, the Dark Phoenix saga, and even Days of Future Past, and did them so much better than how the movies had tackled the storylines. And speaking of storylines, another thing that I have to bring up is just how they don't shy away from heavier topics. Sure, the series still suffered from some censorships, but they did find a way to discover some loopholes and discovering other means to tell stories that are more mature for older audiences. And since censorship in cartoons aren't as strict as they once were, I do feel like the X-Men could get away with a lot more stuff if it was to be revived to this very day. And to sort of segue into the next pro that I have in mind, since the X-Men comics have matured over the years and delved into darker content, this could be the perfect opportunity for X-Men the Animated Series to be revived and tell the new stories that they originally couldn't get away with. A few storylines that comes to my mind are of course Onslaught, as well as maybe something in relation to Deadpool, or maybe even something as recent as the likes of Schism or House of X. And because there have been an X amount of X-Men stories that have been told ever since the cancellation of the animated series, it does give the show a lot of material to work off of and adapt more recent storylines from the X-Men comics. And the final pro that comes to my mind on as to why X-Men the Animated Series should be revived is of course the cast and crew themselves, because a lot of them have been very vocal on them wanting to revive this series and tell new stories. And it is pretty clear to me at least that both the staff and the crew are as bigger fans of the series as the rest of the fans, which does come to show in the final product because they do put so much love and care within the storylines as well as the overall franchise. And with all that being said, of course there are some few cons to discuss in relation to a potential revival for X-Men the Animated Series. And one of the most glaring of them all is the fact that it would be difficult for a new audience to jump in and enjoy the adventure. Because at the end of the day, the main target audience for Marvel cartoons are of course kids. And so if this series was to be revived, then a lot of the new audience would be alienated by this incarnation because they didn't grow up with this series much like we did. And this is a pretty difficult obstacle for them to go through because not only do they have to bring the old viewers back, but they also have to attract the new ones. And given its legacy, it would be hard for the new audience to really enjoy. And speaking of legacy, that is also one of the few glaring cons that this show has to offer, which which in a sense is a double-edged blade the more you really think about it. And although there is a massive cult following surrounding this animated series, if they were to revive this series and renew it for a new season, then they have some massive shoes to fulfill. Because X-Men is such a legendary show that it is kinda difficult to really outdo what they previously done. And yes, I am willing to admit that they do deserve a much better finale than what we originally got, but once again, if they're not careful, then chances are it could fall flat on its face and it would become nothing more but a pale imitation of the original series. And the final and debatably the biggest con of them all is the fact that if they were to revive X-Men the animated series, then it could potentially open the floodgates. Because let me remind you that the X-Men series is actually a part of the original Marvel cartoon universe, in which does feature the likes of Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, and what have you. Then inevitably people would demand for a revival for Spider-Man the animated series, as well as Iron Man, Fantastic Four, and even the Incredible Hulk. And while I would be okay with this, and chances are a majority of you would agree on me in that it would be pretty cool to see all of those shows being revived and have this same universe once more, but in the long run that would open up some big problems in which could alienate new people for the previous reasons that I've just mentioned. And with all of that taken into account, we do have a pretty good argument for either case. And while it is a logical choice for them to revive X-Men the animated series on paper, chances are it would be somewhat problematic in the long run. But the real question is, should X-Men the animated series be revived or rebooted? And like I said, there is a pretty good argument for either case, but if you ask me, the best case scenario would be to do a soft reboot. And by a soft reboot, I am talking about them doing a completely different series for the X-Men while remaining within that same continuity. Kind of like a sequel series in a similar vein to the new Batman adventures. And like I said, X-Men the animated series has every right to be revived, but I think the best way to do so while also attracting a new audience is to revive the show by doing a soft reboot of sorts. Have the new X-Men cartoon being set after the event of the original animated series, and focus on a new incarnation of the X-Men team, like maybe we see some regulars like Rogue, Wolverine, Cyclops, while also introducing new ones such as Magic, Nightcrawler, or maybe even a villain. And if you were to have this revival be its own series that is connected to the original animated series, then it wouldn't necessarily tamper with the original legacy. Granted, it could be set after the event of the original series, but at the same time, if it was to focus on a different team and it was set after the event of the original series, then it could stand on its own and it would be a good jumping on point for newer audiences. And if you ask me, having a sequel series is the best of both worlds, bringing in a younger audience while also showing some respect to the cult following who were there from the very beginning. So what do you think of X-Men the animated series? Do you think that should be revived? Do you think that should be rebooted? Do you think that they should be doing a sequel series instead? Or do you think that they should just do a completely different show for the X-Men altogether? Comment below and share some thoughts, and don't forget to give me some suggestions on which franchise I should focus on next, whether it be from movies, comic books, TV shows, or anything else. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video, please like and subscribe, take care and have a good one.